Hello, it's Alex. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel here. This week's Friday Sews, I've got some Sew Frugal 23 work in progress. I've made a bit of a start on my Sew Frugal outfits mentioned in my previous video. And I've kind of made a bit of a palette cleanser because some of that Sew Frugal stuff wasn't quite going to plan. So which shall I start with? I'll start in the order that I sewed things in the week. How about that? So the first thing I made was, or started to make was, let me just grab it, the denim skirt that I talked about in my Sew Frugal 23 video. So this pattern is from Spoonflower, and it also comes with a video tutorial and written instructions on the web page. The size range, I can't remember. I'll put a title up. So it didn't go to plan. And the reason it didn't go to plan was entirely my fault. I have said many times before that I tend to work in metric measurements and not imperial. It's that very strange thing we have in the UK. We're a real mishmash, you know, we still operate in miles, we still weigh ourselves in pounds and ounces. We do all sorts of things still in imperial, but for me, when I learnt to sew using metric, and I really struggle with inches for sewing. For some silly reason, I thought I knew what my measurements were in imperial, and I made this skirt in a size 10, which would be a 30-inch waist. I don't have a 30-inch waist. My waist measurement is around about 79 to 80 centimetres, so that is about 2.5 centimetres more. And clearly there's not a lot of ease in this skirt, because when I got to the point of I'd made it all up, no waistband on yet, got to the point of putting the waistband on, and I put it on to check fit, and I couldn't even, I was like, got about as far as here, and there was no way I was managing to get it up there. And yeah, when I checked the measurements, completely my fault. However, the seam allowance in this pattern is 5/8 of an inch or 1.5 centimetres. I seem to be making most things recently have more like a 1 centimetre seam allowance. So in theory, I could unpick all my seams and re-sew it together and take, you know, minuscule seam allowance, well, just right up to the overlocker thread. Not quite so easy, because this is one of those patterns where they get you to cut your pieces out and overlock all the sides of the pattern pieces before you do anything. I quite like doing that. It's a bit boring overlocking all your pattern pieces, but on the other hand, you know, sometimes it's really nice. I certainly find that if I am making a seam where you're going to press the seam allowances open, that it is a lot easier to overlock those pattern pieces first before creating the seam, rather than once you've already got that stitching in there. So I just went with the instructions. But actually, because of the nature of this skirt, and because I wanted to have that kind of jeans style top stitching on it, having an opened seam is not really much use to you. You kind of want to overlock the two seams together, maybe just have a 1 centimetre seam allowance, press it to one side, and top stitch like jeans and denim skirts normally are. So I hadn't really kind of clocked that until I came to make it. So when it came to, for example, the centre back seam, which by the way I eliminated on the pattern it had a back split, and I just moved it to the front because that's where I want to have it. So there is my centre back seam. Hoping that will focus if I'm not in the frame. So what I did was I pressed it to one side, but the seam allowance that was on the inside, that's, you know, closest to the fabric, I trimmed down. So now what I've got to do is unpick all that seam, try to take as much of the seam allowance as I can into the main garment, but it's not the full 1.5 centimetres because I know inside there it's trimmed down, which is really annoying. I was enjoying doing all the top stitching. I did for once use top stitching thread, which you just use on the main bit of the machine. You put regular thread in the bobbin. Took me years before I realised that's what you did, and I wondered why it always jammed up my machine. So yeah, slightly long stitch length, just on the top of your machine. Yeah, I was really pleased with it. The instructions for doing the fly were pretty straightforward. I did look at the video tutorial here on YouTube rather than looking at the written instructions. Kind of works for me. So I've still got chalk marks and whatnot on here. I don't know that I necessarily checked the length of the zip that was required. I just used whatever I had. So perhaps if I had a longer zip, it would help me. I don't know. But yeah, look, I was enjoying all my top stitching. Yeah, excuse the chalk marks on the back. And it was all going really well. I added a bit of top stitching, you know, down the side. When you sew jeans, they usually have you do some top stitching down to the bottom of where the pocket sits on the inside. And the little bar tack, I did all of that. But yeah, can't get it on. So, as you can see, I have now left it. I will come back to it, but I really have got to be in the mood to unpick it all and unpick all that lovely top stitching and reconstruct. That's the word I'm looking for, reconstruct it. And I was just annoyed with myself. So I decided that I would just put it in the corner, come back to it later. But my waistband is all ready to go on. The other thing that I did that the instructions or the pattern didn't come with is I have got ready some belt loops. That's relatively easy to do, isn't it? Some belt loops. I just thought that would make it look a little bit more denim skirty. And I added about 20 centimetres to the length to give it that kind of more of a maxi length on me. The pattern does come in 3 lengths. I think there's a midi, a kind of knee length, and what they call long, but wasn't quite long enough. Let's see if we can. I'm not sure that's showing, but anyway, yeah, so very grumpy after making this and just not in the mood. And to be honest, that was partly because that was the last thing that I sewed after my Stylark Billy trousers that I showed you last week, which had also not exactly gone to plan. So 2 fails, one after another. It's not good, is it? I do want to say, with those Billy trousers, you have all come up with some brilliant suggestions in the comments on that last video. I really appreciate all the time that everybody took to do that. I am taking them all on board, and I am my theory is that I will spend a little bit of time unpicking and fiddling around with that front section on those trousers. But if I'm not going to get too bogged down with it, if I can't resolve the issue relatively easily, spend maybe no more than an hour or so on it, then I'm just going to give them up and just accept that, you know, I should have made a toile and they're not working. But again, I need to be in the right mood for it. So yes, I was very grumpy after that, and I kind of threw them away and decided to do my palette cleanser. So my palette cleanser was my t-shirt that I'm making now. I'm not making it, I'm wearing it. And I showed you this pattern from Joli Lab. It's the Rachel t-shirt, and this is that fabric I showed you recently, which is the lovely linen jersey. It might be linen and viscose. And this is that colour, the blue, that was listed on the Lulou Designs, that's the fabric shop, listed on their website as suitable for autumns. As I said before, I tend to be nervous around wearing blue. Now, I really like how the colour looks on me. However, I am going to reserve judgment until I see this video back, because honestly, you would be amazed. I really recommend that you all try doing this. Sometimes I look in the mirror and I see something and I think it looks good or I think it looks bad. And then when I see it back on video, it looks completely different. And I very often change my view on something. So I'd really recommend it just when you're, that you take a photograph or a little video on your phone and you look back on things, especially when it's something you've made and you decide you don't like it. You might find it actually looks a little bit better than you thought. Yeah, it's amazing the difference it is on video or as a still as opposed to with your own eyes. I don't understand why, but it definitely is. So yes, I really enjoyed making this top. It was nice and easy. This is a size 42, not very inclusive size range, I'm afraid, on this pattern. But this is the version that has what they call the sweetheart neckline, which has the shirring at the front. It's a little bit low because I don't have a particularly huge bust. I am not too concerned, but I think if I was somebody with a bigger bust, I might want to slightly adapt that. I feel I'm a little bit, if I pull it down, I'm in danger of bra peeking out, which is not a look I'm going for. But yeah, nice and easy to make. What happens with this pattern is you've got a number of different necks and a number of different backs. There isn't a bog standard crew neck option, but I think the necks are a square neck, a boat neck, and the sweetheart neck. Now the sweetheart neck really is just the square neck with this shirring at the front. I was particularly interested to see how you would do this, because if anyone else has done any shirring, you'll know that when you get to the end of your sheared stitching, it's almost impossible to actually secure that down. Usually the end is inside a seam allowance, so that's what really secures the elastic thread. The elastic shearing thread, absolutely secures it down. So I was intrigued to see how they did it. Obviously, I did a little test on a scrap. And what you do is you mark on your centre front, you mark a straight line, which I think was 13 centimetres. Yeah, if I was worried about this being a bit booby, I might reduce that length. So you just mark a line, you put your shearing elastic into the bobbin, like you do with any shearing, and you sew just slightly to one side of your chalked line. You sew down to the end, couple of stitches across and back up again. And that's how it works, so that the elastic, the shearing elastic, is secured into your neck binding. So actually, sorry Joli Lab, but actually you could do it with pretty much any t-shirt pattern and get the same effect. I really like it. I think it looks quite pretty. Not a word I usually use or I associate with me or my style, but anyway, I really like it. Nice and easy to do, as I said. The only thing that I did change is that the neck binding itself is pretty narrow, and they had you putting it on almost like a binding. You still have to stretch it in the normal way that you do with a neck binding on a t-shirt. But I just could see that it was going to be incredibly fiddly being that narrow. So I did it the normal way you do, where, you just sew up your binding at the back, you quarter it, and then you sew it as a completed folded over band. And I found that to be pretty easy. I used a twin needle to top stitch it, and I used a twin needle for the hem. So yeah, nice and easy. I love this fabric, by the way. I will definitely be buying some more. Better go see what other colours they've got. So yes, did that. And then I still wasn't in the mood for taking on my denim skirt or my billy trousers. They're over there. I do desperately want to make that Gertie society dress that I talked about last week. But I just wasn't in the mood for taking on any big projects. So I decided to make a second one of these, and I did a different version, and I made this out of the stripy fabric I showed you, also from Lulou Designs last week. So as you can see, I chose different options. Obviously I went for long sleeves. This is the square neckline at the front. I don't think it's that square, but it's a scoop neckline, isn't it? And I went for the deep neckline at the back. So we're now looking like this. Hopefully I don't have escaping bra. So the back, there are three options, just a standard back, a deep, I think it's called a semi-deep back, and a deep. This is the deep. Now, in effect, all of the options on this t-shirt make it reversible, with the exception of the sheared one that I had on my blue version. So I could, if I wanted to, switch this round, which gives me a deep front and a scooped back. I didn't bother pattern matching the stripes on this. They are relatively close together, and you know, I wasn't, as you can tell this week, I wasn't in the mood for paying huge amounts of attention, and I think that the stripes are frequent enough that you get away with it. The only thing I did differently with this one is I still put the band in the traditional way, so I didn't do the binding, but I made sure where the join is on the band, normally I would put that on the centre back, but because the neckline on the centre back is so visible, I moved it around so it's just past the shoulder on one side. I can't even tell you which side it is. This side, I think. Just so it wasn't right where your eye might be drawn to. I know there's lots of t-shirt patterns out there, but if you are going to get one, yeah, I really like this one, but not massively size inclusive. So the other thing that I did this week, I have also made the Lago top, which was another of my Sew Frugal 23 patterns, and I'll show you that in a sec. But one thing that I could not resist buying this week, to cheer me up, that's my excuse, I have put a few more pictures up on the wall in my sewing room here, and you know, the more cluttered it gets in here, to be honest, the more it feels like me. It's very much my thing. I love that this is the one room in the house that is just solely mine, and I can do whatever I want without having to talk to anyone else about it or discuss it or taking anyone else into consideration. I mean, to be fair, family might argue I do that elsewhere in the house. But anyway, I can do what I like in here, and I like it being cluttered. I saw these on Instagram on the account of a woman whose shop is called the Swagman's Daughter. Now, one of you subscribers told me about this account quite a while ago, thought I might like it, and I love it. She basically collects stuff. I think she goes to house sales and things and goes through boxes and picks out vintage bits and pieces. So they can be really things like 1950s plastic hair clips to sewing bits and pieces. She has quite a big sewing section. She has lots of vintage buttons and all sorts of weird and wonderful things. And when she put these on Instagram, I was like, I've got to have them in my sewing room. So they are packages, old vintage packages of sewing thread. So I'm never going to take the thread out of them. If I move, you might focus. So look, if not, I'll put a still in. So yeah, look, I've got the picture of the factory on the outside, all nicely parcelled up. I just could not resist at least buying a couple of these. Yeah, I had to have them. They weren't particularly expensive. Yeah, I really love them. I'm not too sure how I'm going to display them in here, but I will display them somehow because it will give me huge amounts of pleasure every time I see them. I absolutely love them. So yeah, I would go and, I kind of didn't tell you all about the Swagman's daughter, to be honest, for a little while, because I wanted to keep it as my secret. But, you know, she has got some really fabulous vintage bits and pieces over there. So I'll put a link in the description box below. Okay, so let me show you the Lago top. I've made two. First one I made was the one in the, it's just a slightly off-white Ponte. It's a really nice Ponte. It's a Viscose Ponte, I think, that was from my stash. And it had the right amount of stretch to it. And I actually think that this weight of fabric for a tank is really nice. It just feels, I don't know, it just feels like it looks like a slightly better quality than if I went for just a regular jersey. It's amazing with stretch patterns how the fabric choice makes a difference. I mean, when you think that this top, which is a cotton jersey, feels much more fitted, it's exactly the same pattern, exactly the same size, in comparison to the blue linen viscose one, which, you know, had a bit of ease and a bit of drape. So yeah, it's always fun to play with different fabrics, isn't it? So I really like this. It was a nice, quick and easy make. The, you know, there's a bit of fiddling around because you've got binding around the neckline and around the armholes, but itch to stitch, as always, have really nice instructions, but it doesn't fit me brilliantly. Again, I'll put it on. Okay, so at first glance it doesn't look too awful, but where it's sitting around my neck, it's where it wants to, where the straps want to sit, it's slightly bagging out, but that's not to do with how the neck binding has been put on. It does, if I kind of do it like that, it does actually sit really nicely. But my biggest problem is this here under my arms. I don't want to spend the whole of the time I'm wearing it kind of doing that and tucking that excess fabric under. Is actually just sitting like this. Walk into my own table, I do that all the time. So I decided that what I would do is I would make another one and I'd size down. The sizing at Itch to Stitch I have always found to be really good. I made a size 8, that's a US 8. And the measurements for the 8 are very close to my actual measurements, which is really unusual because for me, normally my waist measurement sits at least 1, if not 2 sizes higher than where my bust and my hip measurements sit. My shape is starting to change a little bit. I've been working out at the gym for almost a year now. And by that, I'm not trying to be euphemistic. I genuinely mean, I'm not just saying I've lost weight. I have changed shape. One of the slogans at the gym I go to is strong, not skinny. I really like that. So yes, my arms are bigger now. And yeah, there's all sorts of bits of me that are just slightly different. So my waist has come down a little bit, but I'm still never, ever in the same size block as the hips and the bust. But with Itch to Stitch, I am. Hooray! That's really unusual. So I really like that about their patterns. But this does have, even though it's a stretch pattern, this does actually have positive ease around the waist, and I think possibly around the hips. Don't feel so much, but it's definitely around the waist. So I felt that I could get away with sizing down. I thought it might help with this armhole and neck situation, and because there's not negative ease around the waist, it wouldn't be too around the waist. So I went down to a size 6, trying to stick within the Sew Frugal 23 guidelines. I used a stripy fabric that was left over from making the Rachel t-shirt. So I also took some length off this one, and I'll be honest, I think I took 10 centimetres. I think that was too much. Okay, so hopefully you can see that it's sitting much better around here and around the neckline here. So I feel that that looks better, and it's still not too tight around here. So yeah, I'm really glad I sized down. As I say, I think I took a little bit too much length off, but you know. The other thing that somebody reminded me in the comments on last week's video, yes, honestly, I really do appreciate all those comments, was a little reminder that it is a racer back. So I'm not sure if I've got escaping, I think there's a bit of escaping bra. So you do need to consider that. Now, obviously there are racer back style bras, but I've got, I just got them on Amazon, I'll put a link. I've got a selection of clips that you clip onto your existing bra that pulls the straps in at the back. And I found, they come in, you know, they're different colours and different sizes and all the rest of it. I found that that works really well if you're all that bothered about it. I was also recommended by, I'm seeing a physio at the moment because I've got problems with my hamstrings. But I mentioned while I was there that how much backache I get because of sewing. I suspect I'm not the only person, you know, we're kind of hunched over. And he said, why don't you get one of those clips that turns your bra into a racer back, because it might just help you, you know, sit upright a little bit more rather than doing that. So yes, thanks to the physio that I bought those, and actually it is helping a little bit. But nothing's going to stop me sewing. So that's me this week. I've been kind of playing it safe after my skirt disaster and my billy pants disaster, but I now feel much more positive. Do you know, I had an amazing 8.5 hours sleep last night. I never sleep that long. I really struggle with sleep. It's, you know, typical for menopausal woman, isn't it? Or postmenopausal. Yeah, if I get 6 hours, I'm normally really pleased. So 8.5 is astounding. And it's amazing how much more positive I felt today and much more kind of able to take on the world. So I think that my kind of negativity about tricky stuff has hopefully been put to bed and I can start to make some progress. So whether I get on with that, unpicking on that denim skirt, or have a go at the billy trousers, I don't know yet, or I might just dive straight into the Gertie society dress. But whichever way I go, I'm definitely feeling much more in the mood for taking on something a little bit more exciting than, you know, another jersey top. But good to do, and at least I've got one element of my Sew Frugal outfit together. So thank you very much, everybody. Links to anything mentioned will be in the description box below. Do check out my Sew Frugal 23 video if you want to know what on earth I'm talking about. I'll put a link to that below. And thank you very much, as always. You're all such good company. I'll see you soon. Bye bye.